Thank you for staying with us on You Did, because we have another My Story coming up, this time from Central Kenya. And Central Kenya had never witnessed anything like it, not even the struggle for multi-party democracy. We're talking about large-scale demonstrations that not only paralyzed businesses, but also ruined lives, some of them permanently. Kamau Mwangi, yes, and this is his story, takes a look at the events of this year in Nyeri that came with an unusual attack on journalists and the setting of a new world record for anyone to ever hug a tree.
Now, for every journalist, it is normally their hope that each morning they set out to venture into the field, they will get back home to their households or to their houses safe and sound. But on the 7th of July this year, during the Saba protests, that almost never became for some of the journalists here in Nyeri County, I included. And I remember protesters started engaging with the police at around 10 a.m., heading towards 1, 2, 3 p.m. As it is normally our duty, we started doing our live links very early. We could see the protesters gathering. What came as a shock was around 12:31 p.m. when I was on my Inoro TV link, and the protesters and the police almost looked as if they had come to an understanding that they would continue with the protest, of course, in a structured manner. And as I was concluding that particular live link, this group of young men that had been released now by the police to follow a certain route that they had agreed upon came towards where we are. And the last thing I remember was some of them coming to where we are and asking whether they will be allowed to speak. But then again, because of the guidelines that had been given then of how we would cover the protests, I decided not to engage them at that particular time. And this is where they became rowdy. I remember trying to pull my microphone from one of them that had already snatched it. And as they began their attack, they first pounced on my video journalist, James Maina, who had his live view on his back, as well as the camera itself. I remember I was holding the tripod, and they tried to snatch it from me. I was beaten on my back because at this particular moment, a colleague of ours from another TV station had come trying to talk them down, and they also pounced on her, Wahungogi. And I remember this moment was quite fast, because even by the time the police were coming to check on us, already we had suffered a few blows. Our videographer had been beaten, roughed up quite a lot, and he had suffered injuries on his back. And looking back, this one has remained to be one of the toughest days on the job for the 9 years that I have been a journalist. Now, 2025 was one of those years where Nyeri experienced some of its worst protests, and this is in relation to the businesses that got destroyed, or rather were robbed. The June 25 protest that had been embarked on as a commemoration of what happened last year during the June 2024 protests, it all started as a very calm day, same as what happened on 7/7. And at around 4 p.m., when attempts to loot that particular supermarket affiliated to the Kieni Member of Parliament failed, the protesters flocked downtown Nyeri, where there is Naiva supermarket, and this supermarket fell victim to irate protesters who were hell-bent on robbing a shopping complex. And I remember receiving images from locals of motorbikes ferrying fridges, ferrying washing machines, and bearing the mood at that particular time. We could not move closer to the scene because to the police then, there was no friend or foe. And on this day as well, I remember Karatina was a no-go zone for journalists, because earlier that morning, we had received calls from our sources saying that the media was not welcome in Karatina, probably because of what had been planned by those that were to engage in protests. And as a culmination of the same, deaths were reported. The police reported 2 deaths in Karatina, and one was of one Ken Ouma, a young man who was shot while exercising at the 3rd floor of a gym in Karatina town, as police tried to control the protesters that had sort of turned rowdy. The other event that really stood out for me was that attempt by 22-year-old Trufena Muthoni to break her own record of hugging a tree for 48 hours and setting a new record for being the only human being on the planet to ever hug a tree for 72 hours. We would even go there at night, trying to film, trying to get to understand where she was with the challenge, and seeing how Kenyans came out in support of her on the 3rd day was respect. And I remember my cameraman and I trying to film that moment, the countdown moment, is one of those events that really stood out for me in 2025.